books in God's holy word, telling the story of Jesus my Lord. The books of the Bible I love to read, the books of the Bible I love to tell. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1st and 2nd Samuel, Kings, Chronicles and Chronicles, Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther, Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes.
Morning everyone! How did you do singing through without all the words? I can remember when Stephen first taught us this song and we sang it every week. So if I had to suffer, so do you. No, I'm kidding. Actually, genuinely, because I didn't learn the order of the books of the Bible before Stephen taught us this song. It is so useful. I genuinely, when I'm looking for a passage in the Bible, I do sing it in my head. It is really useful, and you're quite lucky to learn it at your age instead of as an adult. So, genuinely, I'm gonna keep playing it. So, we're gonna look at 5 more books this morning, and I'm gonna try and make it cool and interesting and put sharks in it. Our first book is 1 Kings. Our key word for 1 Kings is Solomon. 1 Kings begins telling the story of David's son Solomon. Solomon was famous for lots of things, including being really wise and building the temple of God in Jerusalem out of the finest building materials. Unfortunately, near the end of Solomon's reign, he sort of drifted away from God, which was really sad. He didn't worship him properly. And following Solomon, there were lots of other kings, which is why it's called Kings and not just Solomon. And they were very mixed in how they worshipped God. Some were great, some were rubbish. If I was to give a recommendation for reading 1 Kings, I would say go and read chapters 17, 18 and 19, which tell about the prophet Elijah. And especially chapter 18 tells how, when nobody seemed to be worshipping God, Elijah he poured water over all of the altar, and God answered and set it all on fire. It was really cool. You'll just have to read it. Our second book is... Oh, there's another one! 2 Kings. Our key word for 2 Kings is exile. This book is up and down. There are some kings who love God, and there are some kings who do terrible things and worship things that aren't God in ways that are horrible, frankly. They are fine with murder. The people don't want God's help, so he doesn't help them. And it's really sad, because in the whole Bible so far, God's been with them and cared about them, but they don't want him. And so he lets them go. And guess what? They can't defend themselves, and huge numbers of God's people are captured by enemies and taken away from their home, the land God gave them. Our third book is 1 Chronicles. Is that another shark? Oh no, it's a whale. It's similar, but slightly different. Our keyword for 1 Chronicles is, the book says it should be editorial on David, which is fine if you know what editorial means. We can call it David again. So yes, 1 Chronicles, we have the story of David again, written down by a slightly different writer, but still inspired by God. It's kind of like looking at David through a different lens. And the first bit is just the history of who all of David's ancestors were, because it was really, really important for the Jews to see where they'd come from and how God had helped their people. These are slipping off. So a lot of it is the same story as before, with some slightly new details that the last book didn't include. Our next book is 2 Chronicles. It's another whale. Our key word for this book is Judah. So much like 1 Chronicles, 2 Chronicles is a retelling of the events that happened in 1 and 2 Kings through a different lens. How many pairs of these do I have? Enough. So we've already looked at what happened to Judah, how they worshipped God, but then they slipped away and started to worship other things, and they didn't care about God anymore, and so God let them do whatever they wanted, and it ended up really badly as they were taken into exile. Our fifth book is Ezra. And our keywords for Ezra are temple and people. So at the beginning of the book of Ezra, Jerusalem is a mess. So many of its people have been taken away into exile. And Ezra tells the story of how the people started to return. They returned to God. They returned to where the temple was, and they started to rebuild it. They started to fix their friendship with God. They said sorry for what they'd done, and God helped them to rebuild. And by the end of the book of Ezra, they're worshipping in the temple again. So this part of the story of the Bible, the exile, is really important. It's mentioned all through the New Testament, and Jesus speaks about it. Jesus would have learned about it when he was your age. This is a really important story because it shows how people can turn away from God. They can be sent away from the land that God gave them. They can be sent away from God if that's what they choose. But it also shows after the exile how people can turn around and come back, and God can forgive them, and we can have a relationship with God again. Does that sound familiar? I hope so. Because the story of the Bible, just because this is the Old Testament and it's a long time before Jesus was born, there's a reason the song says 66 books in God's holy word, telling the story of Jesus, my Lord. It's the same story, that if we turn away from God, and we do again and again, we do choose the wrong thing and we do things that hurt people and hurt God. But we can always turn back. We can always turn away from those things and ask to be forgiven. And it's Jesus that makes that possible for us today, because the Israelites, as we see, again and again, they turn away and they sin and they ask to come back and they are forgiven. But it's only Jesus who can really, truly forgive us and change us and bring us back to God. Now, I could go on and do the book of Nehemiah as well, because actually, originally, Ezra and Nehemiah was all one book, and we cut it in half later on. It was all written together. But I'm going to stop there, because I don't want to go on too long, and I want to give you a challenge now. Can you match up the books of the Bible and the one word that Amy, James, and I have given you to summarise them? Let's see how you do.